Here's what's coming up on Network Africa. Mali and Niger to end tax agreements with former colonial power France. The UK and Rwanda sign a treaty to resurrect the plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. Plus, more South Africans reflect on the life and times of its great leader, Nelson Mandela, 10 years after his death. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Olarinde. Britain has signed a new treaty with Rwanda, which it says would overcome a court decision blocking its plan to deport asylum seekers to the East African country. Under the new deal signed by British Home Secretary James Cleverly, and which replaces a non-binding Memorandum of Understanding, Britain says Rwanda would not expel asylum seekers to a country where their life or freedom will be threatened, and that was one of the court's major concerns.
The treaty that we signed today builds on that joint work. It takes the positive professional attitude that you and your government display and allies it with the work that the UK is doing to ensure that we break the business model of those evil people smuggling gangs. We want to make sure that people can live in safety and prosperity, but your country has made a clear and unambiguous commitment to the safety of people who come here. That has been displayed, and we have seen that in practice.
The treaty we are have just signed today, we reinforce the mutually beneficial framework for cooperation that we have developed. It will re-emphasize in a binding manner already existing commitments that address the concerns raised in the legal process about the protection of asylum seekers.
The Sudanese army has intensified airstrikes in the capital, Khartoum, despite Saudi and U.S. brokered talks aimed at halting the current fighting. The lack of progress at the talks in the Saudi city of Jeddah dashed hopes for the resolution of the conflict between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces. Residents in Omdurman, a city that adjoins Khartoum, say the army keeps firing artillery aggressively that often lands in civilian homes. Talks in Jeddah were first suspended in June and then resumed in October. The discussions are currently adjourned this week with no new agreement. The months-long war has displaced more than 6.5 million people and devastated the economy, and also triggered ethnically driven massacres in Darfur. South Africa's foreign ministry says a total of 19 South Africans who had been trapped in Gaza have now arrived home safely. They arrived at the Johannesburg OR Tambo airport on Tuesday afternoon aboard a flight from Cairo, Egypt. The group had initially been evacuated to Cairo through the Rafah crossing after securing approval from Israeli authorities. Ozain Dango, the Director General of South Africa's Foreign Ministry, said that the agency will make efforts to safely evacuate citizens that are still in Gaza, but however did not specify how many South Africans remain trapped there. Thousands of people of different nationals have been evacuating through Rafah border crossing in Egypt to flee the war in Gaza. It's been 10 years since South Africa lost its first democratic president, Nelson Mandela. Tata, or Madiba as he's affectionately known, will always be remembered as a political force who gave up his life in service of South Africa. Well, our correspondent, Innocent Semosa, went out on the streets and engaged with some locals to reflect on the life of Madiba.
It has been 10 years since the world bid farewell to a global icon and a symbol of resilience, Nelson Mandela. The CEO of Nelson Mandela Foundation, Sello Hatang, says hopefully African leaders will draw inspiration from the icon, as visionary leadership is still work in progress in the continent.
Those who are leading now are not leading with the same value system that Madiba had. A sense of selflessness, that you are there as a servant, not as the one who needs to be served, that you are there at the behest of your people. And I think if we are to begin to think like that, it means that we'll be bringing up more servant leaders.
I had the opportunity to speak to locals to hear their thoughts on Nelson Mandela's impact even a decade after his passing.
I wish if he was, maybe we were going to see more changes. Yeah, like now our youth are in drugs. I think if Utata was alive, I was going to stop all that, because now we don't have youth. Actually, I only see you who is nice, clean and bath. All our youth are on the street, no job, no nothing. I don't know where is this country taking us to, but I hope Ramaphosa is going to change things.
Okay, I remember him, 1994. It was the first black vote, and then I see a lot of things because of that time I was young, and then things changed.
Yeah, well, we still remember President Nelson Mandela because he was the hero. We are here and we are united with other people because of him. If it was not Mandela, we were going to struggle up until now. So I think Mandela is a hero and is a legend. Yes, he's an inspiration as a young person, because if it was not Mandela, I was not going to get to work. Because of Mandela, we've got freedom, we're living nice, we are united with white people now.
Well, Nelson Mandela would have been 104 years old this year. On the streets of Johannesburg, he's been celebrated for his contributions in the collaboration of the Bill of Rights and the country's now celebrated constitution. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Simosa, Channels Television News.
The military governments of Mali and Niger have announced plans to end their decades-long tax agreements with France within the next 3 months. In a joint statement, the ruling juntas of the two countries say they are ending the tax pacts due to what they describe as France's persistent hostile attitude towards their countries and the unbalanced nature of the agreements, which results in a loss of revenue. Well, the deals were created to prevent Malian and Nigerian nationals who live in France from paying tax in two countries. They also prevent French nationals in the two African countries from paying twice. Well, this move follows a similar decision by the military government of Burkina Faso earlier this year. It's also the latest in a series of actions by the military governments of the three countries to sever ties with France, their former power, since they took powers in recent coups. Well, let's talk more on the relationship between these three countries. Joining us now in our Abuja studios is David Otto, defense and security expert. Hello, David. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with your thoughts on this newfound alliance between Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso.
Well, I think it's not really new, but of course, you know, these countries are linked by what we describe as the Liptako-Goma triangle. But if you look at the recent happenings, as you rightly mentioned, these are three countries that are now ruled by military juntas after the democratically elected presidents, you know, were taken out of power through what has been described as a military coup. You know, I think the reaction, especially from the regional bodies like ECOWAS, but of course, you know, from the international community being pressured by France, has pushed these three nations to kind of form, you know, a glue, you know, to protect each other. So it's some kind of a survival, you know, mechanism that, you know, these three countries are generating, especially knowing fully well that the French will try to dig deep, you know, and, you know, destabilize these nations if possible. You know, so I think, you know, it's more or less what we're seeing at play is an anticipation, perhaps, of what might happen next. Remember, there's an expectation that these three countries will then hand over to some kind of, a democratically, a civilian government or civilian rule. So the more they get closer, the less likely we are to see, these dates of handing over to a transitional government or, a democratically elected process, being instituted. But let's wait and see. But what we know is that, I refer to them as the three musketeers of the Sahel as we speak.
Well, David, if you're referring to them as the three musketeers of the Sahel, we know the three of them have also quit the G5 Sahel Security Force that was meant to, secure that region, leaving Chad and Mauritania alone in that alliance. What impact do you think this would have on the security of the Sahel region that has been battling, jihadist insurgency?
Well, I think it would have a significant impact if all of a sudden three members of an alliance of five or so, quit. But of course, initially, I think the argument would be that the G5 Sahel has not worked. Remember, one of the main reasons why these countries overthrew their democratically elected leaders was because, they cited the lack of security, and especially when it comes to tackling jihadist organizations, within the Al-Qaeda and the ISIS sectors. So the G5 was meant to do that. So because it didn't succeed, I don't think, they had any reason to stay within that bloc. But initially, when this G5 was set up, I thought it was even a wrong idea because we already have the multinational joint task force. Initially, I believe that it would have been an expansion and more capabilities given to the multinational joint task force, to which countries like Nigeria, and Cameroon, of course, do have, membership. I didn't see the need for the creation of the G5. So I'm not very surprised that it has collapsed, especially at the time when, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger deem it as some kind of an underhand of the French, staying, as a result of, their interest in staying in the region after the Operation Back-In has been dismantled. So I'm not surprised, that, they're leaving, and I don't think it would have any much significant impact, from an operational point of view.
Also been talks of forming a federation between these three countries. How is this expected to work, and how successful do you think this would be?
Well, initially, after the condemnation, especially the most of the recent coups in that triangle, which was Niger, ECOWAS had threatened to launch a military operation to reinstate, President Bazoum. But that pushed the Nigerian and the Malians and the Burkinabés to form, what they call the Liptako-Goma Alliance, which, some kind of a defense and military pact. Interestingly, they initiated what was the equivalent of Article 5 for NATO, which was any attack by any internal or external aggressor against one state would be an attack on the other. So I think what is happening is that, we're seeing a much more strengthening of that alliance, first of all by somehow quitting, the G5 Sahel. There's a possibility that, these countries, of course, they've been suspended from ECOWAS. They may not go back to being readmitted, as long as they do not hand over power to a democratic process, within the time frame which, they've promised to do so. But what I think they're looking for now is some kind of, creating a confederation, as they said, which is more an economic alliance, to try and trade between these three countries. Remember that they've been suspended, from ECOWAS, which is, of course, an economic, trade bloc, as it were. Of course, I know that ECOWAS is now, initiated, the ECOWAS standby force, which is a military aspect. But the fact that, Mali, Burkina Faso are no longer have been suspended from ECOWAS, and they need to survive. I think, the coming up of a confederation or a federation, whichever they decide to call it at the end of the day, it's a way of saying, let's trade between each other, at a time when we are all facing a common challenge, which is, being suspended from ECOWAS.
All right. We'll see how it all pans out for the countries. But thank you so much, David Otto, our defense and security expert.
Thank you.
Still to come on the program. Well, the first survivor of last week's mine landslide in Zambia has been rescued, pulled out of the mine. We'll give you more details after the break. Please join us again. Welcome back to the program. Some cherry news coming from the Zambia. The first survivor of last week's landslide that buried dozens of miners at an open pit copper mine has been rescued. Well, the Zambia's disaster management and mitigation units say the 49-year-old man was pulled out from the mine on Tuesday night and is undergoing treatment. The response team also recovered one body. Well, the successful rescue came just hours after Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema said he is still hopeful that the miners are still alive. The accident happened at the Seseli mine in Chingola, about 400 kilometers northwest of the capital Lusaka, after the miners were trapped in 3 locations following heavy rains in the area. In the meantime, rescue efforts are continuing. Well, let's get more on this story. Joining us now is Alexander Musokotwane, a Zambian journalist, for more on the rescue efforts. Hello, Alexandra. Thank you for your time. Do tell us, what is the update with the rescue operations? Have any more survivors been found?
Just as announced, thank you so much. To appreciate. Just as announced, the current update is the rescue of the 49-year-old man that was found alive, and of course with another body that has yet to be identified. And there are quite a number of conflicting stories that are coming from this operation. This should be mentioned that this is the only body that has been discovered. Of course, there were some rumors before that a number of them have been found. Other rumors, of course, that were trending at the time of this particular accident was reported last week, Friday, is that there were some voices that were being heard, but that has been disputed by those in authorities. That includes government and the rescue operations, that includes the state defense and security wings. So the only update now is the rescue of the 49-year-old man, and of course another body that was discovered alongside this particular person.
Well, President Hakainde Hichilema says he's hopeful, and I'm sure that's, I believe many also are hopeful that the miners are found alive. But are the rescuers, in contact with those trapped, or do we have any idea how many of them are trapped to know, the numbers we're working with?
Okay, so on the President's statement that there is no need to declare any mourning period because the rescue operations are currently taking place. He based his advice to those that are surrounding, of course, the mining area itself. And of course, we did travel with the president yesterday on the Copper Belt just to get the on-the-spot look. He said that it's too early, because he, as a Christian, does believe that miracles do happen. He attributed to a number of mine accidents that have happened around the world, where even days after people are still declared alive, even after being trapped. So after that statement was made in the afternoon, of course, this morning, we did wake up to the news of one person being discovered alive. And on the issue of some of those that are trapped and communication with outsiders, that cannot be confirmed, because this is quite a delicate accident. There are long, small tunnels that these miners use, because just for the sake of our viewers getting to know this mine is a non-operational mine. It did stop being operational some years back, but the surrounding communities and surrounding towns around Chingola have made this as their source of an economic activity, because they do find some of the ingredients of copper between 0.5 and 18% grade of copper in these stones, and in the end, after they do collect some of these products, they do sell to some of the businesses that are, it's a ready-made market that even as we speak now, despite the accident claiming over 25 or 36 as confirmed yesterday by the Minister of Mines, Pokabuzwe, even as we witnessing the operations, I mean the rescue operation of the trapped miners, mining activities in some parts of this mine has continued. So the issue of communication with outsiders, I would say no, because it's quite delicate, it's quite complicated, and we are getting feedback and updates as it happens with those at the site.
Indeed, we are holding on to hope because, you know, like you mentioned, India recently just rescued tunnel workers and they were all found alive and, you know, well. So we're hoping for Zambia also to have a positive message from this. Just very quickly, Alexandra, how are the families of, you know, these miners faring, and, you know, ordinary Zambians, how are they reacting to this operation?
All right. So yesterday, I did say that the Republican President, Hakainde Hichilema, did travel to the Copper Belt to have a glimpse, just to have on hand information on what is happening. And part of his trip to the Copper Belt, of course, he did meet family members. According to the Minister of Mines, Pokabuzwe, he did announce that at first, when the accident was reported, 25 family members did come forward and did suspect that some of their family members could be trapped. And by yesterday, 15 hours, that's Tuesday, he did say that those that have come close, those that have come in contact with government are now at 36. So as this operation is happening, of course, all the families do expect the best, that maybe the president's wish of those miners being found alive is granted. And other stakeholders are saying that this does really spell Zambia's decision maybe to ban such type of mining, and the anticipation as well from a number of Zambians is that the best is experienced, because this is the first accident in recent times that has claimed the number of miners that being at more than 25 trapped miners. So there's a hope for the best. And while we're on this, just last week, the opposition political parties did apply for a rally to be held on the Copper Belt. And of course, they did say that they wanted to hold a rally, of course, to discuss other national matters. And their proposed date was 9th December. But following the accident at the mines, they have said, well, this particular rally can wait as the whole nation waits and witnesses the rescue operation or just whatever positive might come from the operation. So this shows that a number of Zambians are worried, they are concerned, and their hope is that this particular accident does bring together, sets aside differences at the moment, as what the president did ask yesterday, that, well, it's time to put our differences aside. Whether this particular accident could have been avoided, that does not matter at the moment. The president is saying that we should put things aside and ensure that the operation does bring its desired success.
Right then, we do hope and pray for a positive outcome. Alexander Musokotwane, Zambian journalist, thank you for your time.
Thank you. To appreciate as well. Thank you.
And that's all we have for you for today on Network Africa. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde.